Phil, and thank you obviously to British New Zealand Business Association for having me as well. So, New Zealand got off to a great start, certainly back in 1893 by becoming the first country in the world to grant the vote to all adult women in its general elections. But moving to more kind of recent times, looking at OECD averages, New Zealand is doing really well on relative basis. When you look at some of the OECD reports, one particular is on gender equality in education, employment, and entrepreneurship. You would see that women in New Zealand do more unpaid work than paid work. They do gain more qualifications than men, and female-owned new enterprises in New Zealand tend to outperform male-owned enterprises. So, quite interesting findings, but on relative basis, it certainly is doing well. In 2020 as well, the gender pay gap that was announced in New Zealand was around 9.5%, which was the lowest across Asia Pacific region. And if I were to bring all this a little bit closer to home, to the banking industry, I also think that the New Zealand banking industry is doing pretty well. And with just looking at the number of female CEOs that we have in the market. It doesn't mean though that we're all done with it. There is always and still a lot to do, and I think that's the journey that we are all on, and we're committed to be on as well. Agree. I think we do use diversity and inclusion quite a lot and describe it quite a lot. But I suppose my favorite description is diversity is about getting invited to the party. So it's all about the numbers, but inclusion is being asked to dance and actually have your favorite song on. So I agree that inclusion is central. It's key to achieving gender equality, and it's about creating a sense of engagement, encouraging everyone to contribute, and not necessarily being in an environment where you have to fit, but you belong, you can belong. So it is something that we take very seriously with an increased focus both at global, regional, and local level. And maybe just to give just small examples around how. So at the global level, we do measure it through our employee engagement surveys specifically. So we do ask questions on inclusion specifically. At regional level, we had focus on diversity and inclusion for a while. We have been having our regional head of diversity and inclusion, but very recently we've actually created a new role on regional head for inclusion. So just to emphasize the importance that we have for the topic, and on the local level, within our executive committee, we do feel accountable, and we're all responsible for driving inclusion by integrating into our business strategy, our matrix, and really providing support for execution. So just to give a couple of examples, we do have specific matrix in our performance scorecard. So I do have specific matrix in my performance scorecard, as well as all of executive committee members on inclusion, to support inclusion. We do try to bring inclusion a little bit more live, not just on matrix, but a little bit more live by offering leadership trainings, mentoring, learning tools to be able to focus on the advantages and challenges on diverse workforce. We do have targets to increase the percentage of women in leadership by 2025 globally, and we do try hard to foster a speak-up culture through various channels, so people can feel comfortable, that they can actually raise concerns. So we again create an environment where they don't actually fit, but they feel like they do belong. So it's really a very, very integral, crucial part of our focus. How it might be perceived as a kind of harder or kind of like a challenge, but actually challenge breeds opportunity. So diversity is certainly one of our key competitive advantages. So when we look at the numbers, I can't talk about 2021, we're just in the period of disclosing them, but like when we look at our 2020 figures, 94% of our customers had cross-border business activities. So we've assisted them in doing business in 41 countries. And we can only serve those very diverse customer base by bringing together an equivalently diverse team of people. And when we look at our numbers, we have about 40 nationalities, 30 kind of countries kind of being represented, speaking even more languages, obviously. And as a total, we have about our 51% of our population who are female. So it's really a very diverse culture, but that's the community and that's the customer base that we serve. And actually it is a competitive advantage. And it is really about, regardless of the background or the culture, it's really about making our employees feel that they are actually working in an environment where they can get a sense of belonging and they're able to contribute and progress. And they can just bring their true selves to work rather than trying to fit to a culture that's out there. So it's really a competitive advantage rather than a challenge. I think that's the way that we do describe it. Certainly a big focus, and I'll try to kind of give you a little bit like a 360 story about the various things that we're doing to be able to maintain. So diversity and inclusion is really rooted in HSBC's history, the heritage, the character. So it's really an important part of everything that we do. So globally, HSBC has an aspirational target of 35% of senior leadership roles, that's director level and above, being filled by women by 2025. So from a New Zealand perspective, we've already achieved that, but with 50% and with 40% of our executive committee being women. But we do also, whilst it's good to have a global target, it's really important to recognize that every market has their nuances. So with that, we have our diversity matrix and country action plans to inform and guide our decision making more at the local level. So from a leadership team perspective, we have specific regular discussions with diversity and inclusion, with our leadership team, human resources, and employee resource group. I want to a little bit just go a little bit more deeper with the employee resource group, because I think they're really quite an important part that help us drive this agenda. So these are kind of volunteer-based just resource groups that are being formed by employees. So these are local resource groups who act as business partners, driving their own local agenda, but aligning to the activities to reach the local employee population on the issues that matter most to them. So including, of course, kind of gender equality. So for instance, one of our ERGs, so employee resource group, we use the ERG kind of abbreviation, the balance ERG, that's focused on gender balance. They hold discussions, panels between all employees, senior leaders on gender equality, and they are very aligned with the regional balance ERGs as well as with the global balance ERGs. For instance, for the 8th of March, they are organizing an International Women's Day event with all employees speaking about biases. So facilitating that, obviously we have our human resources team that are doing an amazing job trying to create a lot of various talent programs to be able to support females and their acceleration in the organization at different levels. So that's happening in parallel as well. A couple of recent local success stories we have is we recently promoted a top performing female member of the local team, who actually happens to be a Kiwi, to be our chief risk officer. Our CFO was a returning working mom from maternity, so we've applied flexible working arrangements for her to be able to make things work. So really trying to embrace it on a day-to-day basis as well, not just rely on HR or human resources policies or the ERG groups. And I think the other thing maybe just to emphasize really is around obviously policies. It's very, very important to have gender neutral policies, right and unbiased decision-making or language when we actually post for recruitment, for selection. We always apply a diverse panel in our interviews, as well as we always ensure that we actually have a diverse set of shortlisted or a candidate pool when we actually go through the interview process. And we always try to make sure that our language is very unbiased. But again, appreciating that unconscious bias is, as we say, is unconscious. So there is always kind of bias, but we're really trying hard to be able to avoid that as much as possible. So it's really, there is really a lot of initiatives and a lot of focus underway. And one maybe last point to emphasize is, for us, when we talk about diversity, and I appreciate the question was around gender equality, but it's really for us, it's really the intersectionality or the interlocks between, which are really increasingly important for us in New Zealand as well as for the group. So whether it's gender equality or whether it's sexual orientation is isolation, so everything, every aspect of diversity is really interconnected. So it's really focusing not just on gender equality, but certainly all aspects of diversity, and acknowledging that interconnectedness is really an important aspect for us as well. So a lot has been done, a lot underway, but there is a lot more to do as well. For improvement, I think it's fair to say that we're definitely moving in the right direction, but there is always more we could be doing. The way that we view this from an HSBC perspective, from an HSBC New Zealand perspective, like, I mean, the country CEO, the executive leadership, the global businesses, like everyone that we have are the driving force, but the fact that we have actually matrix around it is really kind of catalyst to be able to serve, to move the needle, and for that driving force to actually operate further with the right pace into the right direction. So we can be a little bit more aggressive with our targets in 3 key levers, like hiring, promotions, and retention, which is a very important aspect, because there's no point in hire and promote if we can't actually retain. So there is a lot to do, and I certainly believe that that we can be faster. But we also need to appreciate that there has been a lot that's been done, and it's moving in the right direction as well.